What's up, everybody? My name is Alysha P, and we're here with another episode of Know Your Rights Camp podcast. And we are all here on the ground in LA for another Know Your Rights Camp, the first one of 2023. Right. And to my right, I have my beautiful co-host.
Hi, I'm Aicha, y'all. It's the Alysha and Aicha duo.
And to my left, I have the Dr. Amir Whitaker, who is a human rights lawyer. How are you today?
I'm great, y'all. Peace, y'all. Thanks for coming to LA and bringing this magic.
Of course. Glad to have you. So tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what you stand for.
Sure. Wow. So I'm a human rights lawyer. I currently work with the ACLU of Southern California. We're a nonprofit civil rights law firm that existed for over 100 years and actually contributed to some of the cases in the rights that we're going to talk about, whether it's Miranda rights, the right to education, some of those cases. So I proudly carry that torch as an ACLU lawyer, but I'm also the founder and director of Project Knucklehead, a nonprofit that has existed for 10 years, and our motto is free the youth, as I'm wearing right here.
Oh, I love it.
Yes, I love that.
I love that. Well, speaking of the youth,
our agenda for today is talking about the youth. And actually, we're talking about critical race theory and how it's kind of being attacked right now, especially with the governor of Florida. So I wanted to ask you, what's your thought on that? Because I know that you do a lot of civil rights activism. And as of right now, if you're looking at Florida, the work that's supposed to be for Black and brown people are being attacked. So how does that make you feel?
Well, attacked too, right?
Right.
Because they're talking about our ancestors and our stories that they're trying to suppress, right? So they're using words like critical race theory, woke, as catchphrases to really just reference Black people,
right.
And Black people standing up. Because Florida has some of the most restrictive laws in terms of, even free speech and protest rights. So they're really trying to protest, they're really trying to suppress the people. And one of the easiest ways to do that is suppress their knowledge of self, suppress the history of struggles, suppress the history of racial massacres like what happened in Rosewood in Florida where, white people literally got in planes and started bombing Black communities. Those kind of racial massacres that they want us to just move on so America can be great again.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the work that you've done in Florida. Off camera, we were kind of talking about it, and I think it's important to kind of shed a light on what you've done in Florida thus far.
Sure, absolutely. So I started out as a civil rights lawyer in Florida, working for the Southern Poverty Law Center. And I believe in 2014 or 15, we filed a complaint against the Florida Department of Education for similar reasons for what they're doing now. So today, these are the branches of the seeds that they were trying to plant then when the Florida Department of Education passed race-based standards. So literally saying that if you're white, we expect this amount to pass the test. If you're Asian, this amount. If you're Latino, this amount. And at the very bottom, they had the lowest standards and expectations for Black students.
So explain what that means, because when I hear different expectations, I would think they would raise the bar higher for Black students to make it unachievable.
Right.
But I think you mean something else.
No. Essentially, they put, if we were to put a little pole for us to jump over, they really lowered it for Black students in hopes that, the aspirations would be lowered as well. The quality of teaching required, the quality of educational resources, because all of that follows, right? When you have less expectations for a group, you then justify giving them less resources. And one thing is really clear about American history. When it comes to Black education, we have always gotten less resources.
Yeah.
There still has not been a moment in American history where Black education has truly been equal. I mean, that's why I've been a civil rights lawyer fighting it for 10 years now, because we're still on that path for equal education.
Now, Dr. Amir, I want to ask you, because you talk a lot about how this takes an effect on our community, specifically for the youth when they're setting these low expectations. How does that affect them in the long run when it comes to their education, like going to college, graduating high school?
They're essentially setting them up for failure. So here in Los Angeles, actually, when I was doing my research for my doctorate, I saw that only 1 out of every 9 African-American students qualified for entry into the state university system.
Wow.
So the UCLAs, the Cal States, the Berkeleys, because there's a sequence of courses you have to take. And most Black students were not having access to those courses, were not given guidance to those courses, or given the instruction for it. So it literally, when you have lower expectations and lower achievement, it sets you on a path for lower economic, equality, lower jobs and everything else. And within American history, there's always been a space for black people at the bottom, right? And for most of history, it was required by law under slavery and under segregation. But now through critical race theory and lower expectations for black students, they're trying to embed it in other aspects of society.
How do you think in 20 years, how badly would that affect the black community?
Lord, I mean, that's a whole generation, right? That's a whole generation losing opportunities. You would see the descendants, having less information, because history is really important. Those stories are really important. Like, my grandparents have passed down histories and traditions that help mold me into who I am. I mean, for example, at the University of Miami, where I graduated, my grandfather couldn't go there legally. He was not accepted into that university. Yeah, they banned it, and it was a private university. My mentor, Donald Watkins, was like the fourth black person to graduate law school there, and he graduated in the 1970s.
Wow, that's insane.
Yeah, and he's still practicing law today, so he's not like an ancestor. He's a practitioner of law today, and he was one of the first people to graduate, one of the first black people from this university that was letting in other groups since they started.
Just to think, we think it's so far away, and it's a mentor away.
It's a mentor away, and actually I have this with me from my office at the ACLU. This is an award we received in 1977 from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference that exists here in LA, and it was about our work in helping to integrate the schools and end segregation. But again, that's the 1970s. So like our parents, could have been in these segregated schools here in Los Angeles. So people don't know that history, that schools were still segregated then and actually are still segregated now.
Yeah. I was just saying how back where I'm from in New York City, it's so obvious that it's segregated when we talk about like the private schools compared to the public schools and how there's less funding for public schools. And for me, I always felt like I didn't have a chance to go to college because I was given such low expectations. So I wanted to ask you, growing up, were you seen as like the person who got in trouble or someone who was not good enough for it? Because I feel like I was always labeled as hothead. She doesn't listen, so she can't get into college and all that stuff. So what was your experience?
Especially, I mean, that happens. Here in California, black women, black girls are 6% of the student population, but like over 20% of students being arrested, suspended, black girl students. So in my education experience, it was very similar. I started out as an educator, and I have my teaching credential in 3 states, New Jersey, California, and Florida. I've worked in classrooms in these states. But I'll never forget my classroom, my 5th grade classroom, where I was a student, but then when I returned, about 12 years later as a teacher, they still actually had the book, my book, in the class, and students were still using the books. And you know at that first page of the book where it says, this book belongs to blah, 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 there were so many names that they had to put stickers over them over again. And then in my experience as a teacher, just in my internships, I had to go to the school districts next door, and they had brand new books with more current history.
Wow.
I mean, there's schools still in LA where the history books don't have President Obama because they were printed, in 2005.
And it's so insane to think about.
Right.
Like when you're a kid in high school or middle school and you're reading through these books, you're not thinking how printed books could affect just your knowledge of every and anything.
Right.
So it's insane to be older and to think back that funding and people intentionally trying to keep these theories and these learnings and all of this education that we need to really better ourselves away from us. And I guess my question to you would be, why is critical race theory so important to keep into the schools?
Well, we actually want critical learners,
right?
I always thought critical was a good thing. And I always thought being woke or awake was better than being asleep, right? But they want people sleep, and they don't want people doing critical analysis.
As in us people.
The people, right?
Yes.
Yeah, us people, They don't want us to be aware of our struggles and understand that we stand on the shoulders of giants. They want us to not be able to look back multiple generations, So it's really important that we resist, not just through, getting out there in the streets, but teachers, have to find innovative ways to integrate studies of struggle of black people in their curriculum. Parents have to ensure that that information is accessible, but people also have to work to make sure students have books, access to books, free book programs, and different things like that.
That was going to be the question,
Right.
last question, solutions.
What solutions do you have for people when it comes to these type of things? And also, where can they find you? Because you do provide a lot of education and knowledge.
And
so we
resources.
want to make sure that everyone who's watching know where they can contact you.
Absolutely. So you can follow us, ACLU SoCal, on Instagram and different areas. Dr. Knucklehead Esquire is my name on Instagram and other places as well. But there's so many resources out there, free resources. It's almost like this resistance against critical race theory has also mobilized the people who are providing free resources. So 2 initiatives. One is called Teaching for Justice, and they provide a lot of free curriculum, K-12, that looks at these instances of history that where they're trying to suppress, but also the people's history of the United States. A historian named Howard Zinn wrote this book, and they have a version for high school and middle school students that help them, that teaches the true in people's history, because that's really important. You know, one story I want to share about myself is before I became a history major in college and a history educator, actually in high school I was failing history. I failed history multiple times.
Wow, that's interesting.
But I would still leave class, leave school, and go to the library across the street and read about history, read about the Black Panther parties, read about ancient Egypt, ancient Mali. So it's not that I wasn't interested in history. It's just that I wasn't interested in this history, oppressive colonizer history, where I was learning about Napoleon and George Washington and people like that, instead of the people who resisted and fought and the people who look like me. You know, so that's also one of the issues. It's just not just about access, you know, but it's the actual curriculum. What are we actually teaching?
Thank you so much for speaking with us today. We really appreciate your knowledge. And if you want to find out more about what we spoke about, you can follow us on our social, Your Rights Camp.
And thank you so much, Dr. Amir. It was a pleasure having you, and thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you all. Peace and power to the people.